In this video, we're going to be discussing Rav Amram Gaon, one of the most important rabbis of the Gaonic period, and we'll discuss in a minute, um, the author of the first ever Siddur. So, who was Rav Amram Gaon? He was a rabbi. We don't know. I couldn't find anywhere his date of birth. He passed away in the year 875. So, lived during the 9th century. His name was Amram ben Sheshna. He was a student of Rabbi Mendy Ross, who was the previous Gaon, as we'll explain in a minute. He was the Gaon of Sura. He was named the Gaon in the lifetime of his predecessor, which was usually, there was only one Gaon. It was basically meant the head of the academy. And he was named the Gaon in his lifetime. We'll see in 1 second. However, he wasn't appointed the full Gaon until about the year 853, and he was the Gaon for 18 years until his passing. So that is the general biographical information that we have. We don't have a ton. Now let's take a step back on what exactly is a Gaon, and it'll help us understand what why his works were so important. A Gaon in those times was, like we said, the head of the academy. In this case, he was the Gaon of Sura, the head of the Academy of Sura, which is a city in Bavel in Babylon, modern-day Iraq, southern Iraq. You could actually find it on a map. And essentially, what the Gaon meant was that he was somebody who was fluent and proficient in the entire Talmud, which means not just the Mishnah, which is the basic law, but all the discussions around the Mishnah, all the debates, meaning not just the conclusions, but also the debates. You had to know the entire thing by heart. Why was this so important? At this time, the Gaonic period, is immediately following the sealing of the Talmud, meaning the Talmud is basically 400 years of discussion about the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is a boiled down version of 400 years of discussions, and the Talmud is kind of reopening those discussions from the Mishnah. And in the Gaonic period, what they were involved in was mostly trying to keep this tremendous document and to keep the tradition and all the details alive. Now, at that time, they did have manuscripts. However, manuscripts are notoriously prone to error. People make mistakes. People could even do malicious mistakes, but generally speaking, it's just mistakes. You copy and you copy and you copy, and usually the most copyists are copying off a copy, so it becomes very difficult to maintain a manuscript in its full form. So therefore, the Gaonim, their job was essentially they would study the Talmud, and the Gaon would be the head of the academy, and he would correct when they made a mistake in the text. And that was essentially what the Gaon's job was. So, meaning when Rav Amram was named the Gaon, that means that he knew the entire Talmud by heart, every single word, every single detail. So he was named the Gaon, even though in the lifetime of his predecessor. And then, of course, he takes over the yeshiva after Rabbi Mendy Ross passes away. Now, one of the things that Rav Amram was very involved with was answering questions, teshuvos, which means answering questions that he got in Jewish law. So somebody would ask a question that say, we're not sure what the law is in this scenario that's not discussed in the Talmud, or maybe not exactly discussed in the Talmud, or they weren't proficient in Talmud, etc. And they would ask the question, and he would write an answer. And later, in 1792, actually, these were eventually published in a book with, I believe, over 100, maybe even 150 questions and answers. Now, one of his most famous teshuvah, his most famous answer, was a request written by Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rabbi Shimon of Spain. And he said, what are the prayer services? What is the order of the prayer services? And we'll explain what exactly the question and what the answer was in a second. But included in that was actually the son of Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yaakov, of Spain as well. He included in this a donation, a small donation, partially for the yeshiva, partially for Rav Amram's time, to help them write up the order of the prayers. And he writes back probably one of the most famous answers ever in Jewish history. He writes back the Siddur Rav Amram Gaon, the order based on Rav Amram, Rav Amram's answer. And he basically maps out the entire prayer services, what you say first, what you say second, and a exact text. Now, this was unique because until then, we have, of course, originally Ezra, when the Jewish people came back in the second temple period, Ezra said, these are the exact prayers we're going to do. It used to be before then, a Jew would just wanted to pray to God. He had general guidelines, but there was no text. There was no exact verbiage. Ezra decided that there would be an exact verbiage. There's going to be 18 blessings, and there's going to be, these are what you have to talk about in the blessings, and these are the rules of the blessings. The end of the blessing has to include what you talked about in the blessing, etc., etc., etc. However, there was nothing written down. It was still passed on from, passed down the generations, and there were variations. So again, they're following the rules, but there was no exact text. In addition, there are not, some things are halachically imperative, and some things are not necessary in order to fulfill your obligation of prayer. So the question is, what are we supposed to do? What are we not supposed to do? What blessings should we say in the morning? What blessings should we say when we put on tefillin? What blessings should we do during the Shemona Esrei? What are the exact texts of the blessings? And Rav Amram laid it all out in a wonderful, the first siddur ever compiled. And the next generation already, Rav Sadia Gaon based the siddur off that, and all siddurim till today are based off Rav Amram Gaon. Now, in the previous generations, they had the siddur of Rav Amram Gaon, and Rabbeinu Tam actually said that, who was one of the great Tosafists, he said that you have to, everything we have is based on Rav Amram Gaon's siddur as far as prayer, liturgy, etc. So they would actually copy down exactly from his siddur, and they would base another siddur off his siddur. However, today that siddur is no longer extant. Like we said, manuscripts have issues of people adding things, subtracting things, making mistakes, and essentially people would do is they would say, "Oh, I got the siddur of Rav Amram Gaon, but in my community, our custom is to say it like this," and they would edit the siddur of Rav Amram Gaon to fit their community's liturgy or practice or custom, or a certain poem that they would say that wasn't necessarily halachically imperative, but you're allowed to say a certain poem during this prayer service on Shabbos or Rosh Hashanah, so they would add it in. So today, and then like we said, that it's all manuscripts, so you could do all these things without, very hard to tell, but eventually that was not printed until the year 1865. So you can imagine, this is 400 years after the printing press is invented. So it took a long time till people got around to printing it. So they're printing off copies of copies of copies of copies of almost 1,000 years. I think, close to 1,000 years of edits on the manuscript. So it's hard to really say that this is the exact siddur that Rav Amram Gaon did write. Now, in addition, to the siddur being this exact liturgy, he also put in customs and laws in the siddur. So, for example, he would say the custom in the synagogue of the yeshiva in Bavel, in Babylon, is that we say this, or we say it this way, or in the in the house of the Reish Galusa, or the Beis Rabbeinu Shebavel, the synagogue of the leader of the Jewish people in Babylon. This is how they said it, and that was considered authoritative. So he quotes. Besides quoting the Talmud, obviously, and the previous generations, he's also quoting colleagues and customs recorded as they were in Babylon. So really a fascinating work. And like we said, all Siddurim were based off manuscripts of the Siddur of Amram. Now, in addition to that, they now have manuscripts they found in the past 100 years or so. In Oxford, I believe there are some manuscripts that are considered more authoritative of the Siddur of Amram Gaon, and the Siddur of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Chabad Siddur that the Alter Rebbe compiled, which he printed his Siddur in 1803. So that's 50 plus years before the Siddur of Rabbi Amram Gaon was ever printed. But clearly he had such a Siddur, because a lot of his or Siddurim based off that Siddur, like we mentioned, because his Siddur very much reflects the order and the liturgy of Rav Amram Gaon. So, in conclusion, Rav Amram Gaon is, like we said, we don't know much biography about him, but a really pivotal figure in prayer services and prayer liturgy, and the exact order of the prayers, and in the exact words of the prayers. Like we said, and previously there was a little bit more leeway. Today, if you open up any siddur, the differences between siddurim are minute comparatively to what the potential, of broad of liturgies could be. So today's siddurim between an Ashkenaz siddur and a Sephardic siddur is clearly very, very much, they're all based on the same order, the same prayer services, and the differences are minutia. So thank you very much for joining. I'm happy to be back doing these videos. If you have any questions, comments, put in the comments below. And if you please like and subscribe, so that way we can promote these videos and share with more people. And we'll see you, God willing, in the next video.